landing in America now, in California and Florida and Massachusetts and all over the place, radioactive iodine. If you happen, and then these materials bioconcentrate in the food chain. So if iodine lands on the ground, the grass sucks it up and magnifies it 10 to 100 times or more. The cow eats the grass, and it's magnified much more in the milk. And then a lactating woman might drink the milk, and it's magnified much, much more in her milk. And as the strontium-90 passes, or the iodine passes through her breast, it could mutate cells, so years later, she gets a breast cancer, and then the baby drinks the very radioactive milk because it's been bioconcentrated in the food chain. Therefore, they might just be measuring the radioactive iodine in the water falling in Massachusetts. Well, they are, but then they're not talking about bioconcentration. And if you're unlucky enough to drink some milk, and there's a very small amount of iodine in that, radioactive, and it goes into your gut, is absorbed through your gut into the bloodstream and goes up to your thyroid, a few cells in your thyroid might get a high dose, and one of the regulatory genes may be mutated or damaged, so later on you develop thyroid cancer. About 53,000 people living around Chernobyl have developed thyroid cancer, particularly when they were young people, because children are very, very sensitive, up to 20 times more sensitive than adults to radiation. Fetuses, thousands of times more. Of those, about 53,000, I'm just a round figure,
sure,
about 23,000 have died already from their cancers. Probably many more will probably die later. So radioactive iodine is very carcinogenic. There is no safe dose, and they keep saying, well, the levels are safe. There are no safe levels, period. No safe levels of radiation, period.
Helen, I heard this morning that the Japanese government raised the standards of, quote, safe levels of radiation from 6,000 to 100,000.
Oh, my God. Did they? Well, that's just rubbish. It just means that they can't control anything, and there are no safe doses, and it makes me extremely annoyed as a physician that they are lying about science. They are lying, and the people, I suppose they're trying to create calm and they don't want panic. Sorry, people would be panicked, should be panicked, and if I was in Japan, I'd get out. I don't know how, but, if there's a really big explosion and huge radiation gets out and the wind blows south, the whole of Japan could become virtually uninhabitable.
I heard in an interview that you did on Democracy Now!, you said 40% of Europe's landmass is still radioactive.
Correct, and will be for hundreds of years. Now, that data comes from the New York Academy of Science report on Chernobyl, published in the last 6 months. Get the report, you can download it and read it. 40% of European landmass is still radioactive. Plutonium lasts for 500,000 years. How much got out? There are 500 pounds of plutonium in the reactor. 1/3 got out. So it's nearly 200 pounds of plutonium, and all you need is a millionth of a gram to give you cancer, or maybe a billionth of a gram. It's highly carcinogenic. It's lying all around Europe, concentrating in some food. Cesium-137 lasts 600 years, causes brain cancers, muscle cancers. That's bioconcentrating in the mushrooms, in the reindeer, the lichen, and various foods all over Europe. I don't buy European food because I don't know what food is radioactive, you see, because it came down in hot spots with the rain. So you might have a very large field and one corner is very radioactive and the rest isn't, depending upon the rainfall at that time.
Is this why people are running around with Geiger counters, and is it going to help people to have those?
Well, it's interesting. I was just at a conference in Ottawa the other day, and Dr. Ian Fairley, who is a radiobiologist, came from London to give a very, very good talk. And he had a Geiger counter, a measuring counter, and he, as soon as he arrived, you can't measure the radiation inside, but he stuck it out the window of his taxi to see if the ambient levels of radiation were up. You don't know how the wind's blowing, where it's blowing, what it's carrying, but if you look at some maps that are currently being published on YouTube and the internet, you can see this radiation swirling all around the globe. Therefore, if you pick up radiation outside, and it's flying by. Well, first, you shouldn't grow vegetables this year or for quite a long time, and two, you'd better stay inside until this radioactive cloud passes by. But if you don't know, out of sight is out of mind. You can't smell these things, you can't taste them, you can't see them. They're invisible, and it takes a long time to incubate the cancer. And remember, children and babies are so sensitive to radiation. So we are in a pickle. We are in a double bind. If this thing goes on, as is predicted, for months to maybe years, I have to tell you, it's going to mean, I think, millions of cases of cancer, extra cases of cancer. No cancer denotes its origin. No cancer will say, you were made by some radioactive iodine you drank in some milk 20 years ago that came from Fukushima.
There's a nuclear physicist who has done some YouTube videos that has been saying, as of yesterday, last night, that the 200 tons of water that has been poured onto the nuclear reactors, what they're doing is something called feed and bleed, where they're really creating radioactive steam, and that water has to go somewhere. It doesn't just sit there. It's actually creating radioactive water, which is going into the ocean. And he's concerned because the levels that they're testing in the ocean are not from the steam. They're from this radioactive water, which is going into the ocean. Most of the people that are looking at this don't really get it.
Well, they should. Pouring millions of gallons of water into the reactor cores, and it's coming out and going to the ocean.
200 tons.
Common sense. But the other thing that's happening is in reactor number 1, and Stephen Chu, who's the Secretary of Energy in Washington, said that 70% of reactor 1 has melted. And they keep pouring water in to cool it. But when they pour the water in, 30% of it hasn't melted, and it's reaching critical mass, sending up very short-lived radioactive elements that only last maybe minutes, and fluxes of neutrons, which means that the nuclear reaction, it's going critical. The nuclear reaction is continuing. And then the water all boils off, and then it stops, and then it'll start again. And it's called a spurt, S-P-E-R-T, in nuclear physics, in their language. And this sort of thing could heat the rods up very high, and it could produce a hydrogen explosion, which is what happened at Chernobyl. So, look, we're in no man's land now, absolutely.
Now, I want to talk about another devastating topic inside this, because I think that the public really needs to rethink our relationship with nuclear energy. And I want to talk about France for a moment with you. As you know, 80% of their energy is in nuclear power. And they assert they've developed a way to reprocess the waste, quote, with great success. You have a whole body of knowledge about why this is very, very scary and dangerous. Why?
All right. Well, let me tell you, the French are very ignorant and they're very arrogant. I have a French son-in-law who's a count. His sister is a major commentator and a model, but on TV in France. They don't know anything about this because the government built all the reactors. They've been kept in ignorance. The government runs the whole show. And also is pretty influential in Le Monde, their main newspaper. So they don't know. They love their food. They're very agrarian. Every corner you turn in France, I'm exaggerating, but there are cooling towers. Now, what they want to do is take all their radioactive waste, or some, and if you stand next to one fuel rod, which is half an inch thick and 12 feet long for a couple of seconds, you'll get a lethal dose of radiation and die within 2 weeks. They're hot thermally, hot radioactively. They take them up to a La Hague, which is a reprocessing plant. They chop them up by remote control, and they put them in a big vat of concentrated nitric acid, and they melt them. Now, that's just an incredible toxic witch's brew. And from the 200 isotopes in that nitric acid, they remove plutonium. They precipitate it out using various chemical means with kerosene and other things. Now, there are only two elements that are fissionable, plutonium-239 and uranium-235. So because you make 500 pounds of plutonium in a reactor every year, and you only need 10 pounds incidentally to make yourself a bomb, they're extracting the plutonium and they want to put it in reactors called breeders or fast reactors and fission the plutonium. Now, guess what?
What?
If you lose the cooling water, as they did at Fukushima,